Bienvenidos a Chocando Mundos. Yo soy Eli Colín.
Y yo soy Lupe Colín. Chocando Mundos is a podcast where we talk about Mexican culture and history, dive into genealogy records, and discuss the complexities of cultural identity. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Chocando Mundos podcast. Today, I'm here with my sister, Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone.
So today we thought that we could share with everyone why we wanted to do this podcast, and we could talk a little bit about some of the questions we ask our guests. So I guess I'll start. As I said, my name is Guadalupe Colin, and my nickname is Lupe, so I'll just be referring to myself as Lupe. And my sister is Elizabeth Colin, and I always call her Eli, although she has a lot of nicknames, but I like Eli. The reason I wanted to start this podcast was that I'm really interested in talking about other people's experiences with moving to Mexico and then moving back to the United States or vice versa. I like hearing their story and how it affected them. And I also like to do genealogy work. So I like to investigate my family tree and sort of build stories and talk about what happened in the past. But I also wanted to do that for other people, and I couldn't find an outlet to do it. So I thought this podcast might be a good idea to do some genealogy work that's outside of my own family. Just to give you a little bit of background on my education, I studied Latin American and Latino studies at the University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC. And after, I decided to be a librarian. So when I decided to be a librarian, I studied how to do research, and it led me to do more genealogy work. So I'm definitely interested in that. And I decided to invite my sister, Eli. Eli, why did you decide to join me?
Hello. I decided to join because I saw this as an opportunity, I guess, to learn and connect more to my roots and to speak more about my background, I guess. I currently work at a library, just like my sister, but I did graduate. I have a bachelor's degree in zoology, which, what might I bring to this podcast is, I guess, research. It was a lot of research that I had to do as a science degree. So, and I am very interested in digging deep into the history. It's very interesting. So hopefully we get to learn a little bit together.
Definitely. And yeah, I guess you don't realize when you're studying even any type of science degree how much research experience you have or you get to learn. We figured that we would talk a little bit about our history. So we lived in the United States, and then at least when I was 15, Eddie, do you remember what year it was that we moved?
I believe it was 2003.
So in 2003, our whole family moved to Mexico, to our parents' hometown. They are from the same town in Mexico, which is called Tonatico, in the state of Mexico. And I remember just leading up to it, how our parents would talk about moving there, but it never seemed real to me. I don't know if you remember, Eli, but they would always talk about it. They would always say, oh, one day we're going to move to Mexico. But I think they said it so many times, and it just never happened, that I just never believed that it would happen. And then one day I remember Mom saying, we're going to move to Mexico. And I'm like, are we? I'm not sure. And she's like, yeah, we're leaving. We're leaving in 2 months or something. So that was when I started high school in the United States. So I was in 9th grade. And I think we moved in November, from what I remember. So school had already started. So we were there. I was there from 9th grade, which the school system is a little bit different. It's laid out different in this specific town, and I'm not sure how other towns do it. But in this town, elementary school goes to 6th grade, and then 7th, 8th, and 9th are middle school. and then the last 3 years are high school. So technically, when I went back, I was back in middle school, like the last year of middle school. For me, it was a really good experience, and I think you're going to hear pieces of those stories as we record this podcast. Ellie, can you tell us a little bit about when you moved and how old were you? So I was 15 when we moved there, and then when I moved back, I was probably like 20 or 21 years old.
Yeah, definitely. So when we moved there, I was in the middle of second grade and I was 8 years old. In Donatico, I was again in the second grade, but I was like 1 year older than everyone first. And I remember the only memory I have is like being in the middle of the classroom, like sitting down, and then everyone was standing around me and like saying hi to me. They were excited to meet me. They all knew who I was. I was the American one, and they all wanted to be my friend. So I was popular in elementary school, which was not a thing here in the United States. I was popular because I was the American one. And all I remember was thinking also that I was very lost academically because they were way ahead of me at the time. And also, like, my dominant language at the time was English because I was kindergarten, first and second grade, I was in English classes. It wasn't bilingual or just in Spanish. So that was tricky.
I had a little bit more experience with Spanish. I was in bilingual probably from like kindergarten to maybe second or third grade, probably second grade. And then I got switched to English, but I spoke it, I think, a little bit better, maybe. I did struggle in school with writing Spanish. I was not the best at that point. In high school, you would have already learned all the grammar rules. And of course, I didn't know any of that. I knew the basics, and I still actually don't know that much of it. A lot of it I memorized, so I would memorize where like the accents were, and but it probably wasn't the best thing that I did. But I got by and I passed, so that's good. Eli, why don't you tell everyone what is Tonatico? Like, what is it? Where is it? All that info.
So Tonatico is a small little town. It's not like a ranch, but it is like a small rural town. It is has a population about like 13,000. It's all the way in the south of the state of Mexico, and it borders Guerrero. Like you can literally go to Guerrero, the next state, like in what, 10 minutes by car. It is a quaint little town, very peaceful, and you can walk from one side of town to the other in like 20 minutes. So it's very small. Everyone knows everybody, or mostly everyone. And it was very open, peaceful. Like kids would walk around and it was just like normal. Like people would just walk around town and it was very safe, definitely. And just to give you like a picture image, like the center of town has like this magnificent church. We are known for our church, a plaza, town squares, and all the houses around have are red and white. So your typical small Mexican town.
Yes, it is a very small town, very picturesque, in my opinion. Moving there was definitely scary for me. In my school, I knew a couple people when I arrived, mostly cousins, but people were very welcoming. Although, you often get teased about like coming from another place and you're not from there, but they accepted me pretty fast. Like I remember we moved in like early November or something, and my birthday was in December, and my classmates threw me a party. So that was, I mean, it was only I was only there for a month, and clearly like I'd already like made friends, and so that was nice. I think it didn't take me that long to get used to it. School was more of a struggle for me for sure. Did you feel school was hard for you?
When I moved, school, I genuinely don't remember. I'm not gonna lie. I was in second grade and I think I adapted pretty well. I was really young and like learning all the rules and everything was really fast. And I was one of those students who were like fast learners. I didn't have to study. So I might have like been shy at the beginning, but I adapted in general to like school, having friends. I adapted very well. And it could be because I'm too young. I was too young to remember how it was, but I think it was just like normal every day to me.
So now that we came back, do you, I'm not sure how you identify, but when people ask me where I'm from, I always say that I'm from Mexico. Even though I was born in the United States, I just always say that I'm from Mexico just because I think I did live there. And for me, they were really important years growing up. It's like from 15 till 2021. So it definitely impacted me in how I identify. So if anybody asks me if even if it's American or Mexican person or whoever, I always say that I'm Mexican. What about you?
I think I say both. I Today I mostly say Hispanic, but if I go into specifics, I'm like, "Oh, I'm Mexican." But I guess just in general, just like, "Oh, I'm just Hispanic," and that's it.
I guess I don't use Hispanic or Latino or any of those other terms. I did learn a lot when I did my bachelor's on how a lot of those terms were made up by other people. And I guess that's why I don't feel comfortable using them, if that makes sense. And I think we can, during the podcast in future episodes, I think we can talk about some of those, why those labels are important. And even, in the past few weeks, I've heard about why people are rejecting the word Latino, and I think it's so interesting. So I think maybe in future episodes we can talk about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, yeah, I know the word Hispanic, I mean, I say it all the time. It's just easier for me, but it's a weird tag because, like, Brazil is not included in it, but Spain is. But some people would argue that Spain is not included. So, yeah, there's just like all these nuances to these tags or like
Like labels, identities,
these words, labels. Yes, there's a lot of like nuances to these identities, and I do realize them, but at the same time, I'm just like, I don't want to overthink it. And maybe we should one day.
I guess it's just so broad, especially Hispanic. It's so broad.
Yeah, because I don't feel comfortable with Latino. I think nobody around me uses that term ever, so I don't use it. And I think that's simply the reason I don't use it because I don't hear anyone around me here, at least here in the Chicagoland area, using Latino. So
Part of why I think I identify as Mexican is I think that learning another language or being immersed in another language, although we spoke to our parents in Spanish, being in school in another language is really life changing. So right now, my Spanish is definitely less than what it was when I was in like high school, especially at the end of high school. I even attended college for a semester in Mexico. So I learned a lot of, advanced vocabulary, and I don't use most of those words now. I think my Spanish is good. I'm always looking to, get more vocabulary and practice it more. So I'm thinking that some of these episodes are going to be in Spanish as well. And actually, we're going to re record this same episode in Spanish for our Spanish viewers. But English is probably my most dominant language, and I'm not great at either language either, I'm not even writing. Sometimes I struggle in English and in Spanish, but I think I can defend myself in both of those languages. What do you think, Ellie?
just like you, I definitely struggle with both languages. English is definitely my dominant one, since I went in college here. But I mean, some of you will notice that I struggle like picking the words, remembering words. I mispronounce words in English all the time. And it's the same in Spanish. It's even worse in Spanish. I guess you could say I'm proficient in Spanglish. as many Hispanic people here in the United States. I do want to note that since I left in the fifth grade from Mexico, I have like an elementary school level of like vocabulary in Spanish. So I do struggle more. And I can't speak it. Again, I can speak it with my parents, but I forget phrases and words all the time. And I just switch back to English. And I do want to get better all the time.
You do speak it at work though, right? Which I think helps.
Yeah. So I think at work, half of the people that I talk to are like the Latinos, and I do speak to. I speak half of the time in Spanish, so that definitely my levels. My Spanish definitely improved because of work. Because otherwise, I just don't use it day to day.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. And I have a small son, so I've been speaking Spanish to him, and that's really been helping. Although, as you said, like I can only use so many, it's not really complex vocabulary. It's just like leche, luna, it's not really, complex, but I'm thinking that this podcast I think will help both of us with that.
Yeah, I hope so too.
So before we go, I wanted to talk a little bit about the format of the podcast. So we're going to have many of interviews, and our interviews are going to consist of us talking to people about their identity and their history, and we'll also dive into their family roots. So I would have done some investigation before just to figure out what is going on with their family tree, and then we will share with the guest what we found. In our other episodes, we're going to go over some of the other documents we have, as well as some history and cultural topics that I think our listeners could find interesting.
If you really like this podcast, you can always follow us on our social media. If you want to be interviewed, you can always send us an email on chocandomundospodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.